I gave them 9 years, 11 months, and 8 days of my life, and they repaid me by slamming the door on my face just 72 hours before I could retire with dignity. I was literally 3 days away from my 30th anniversary at Global Logistics Solutions, the milestone that would have vested my full pension and guaranteed a comfortable life for my wife and me, but instead, I was standing in a cold, glass-walled office being told that my services were no longer required. My boss, a 32-year-old MBA named Kevin, who wasn't even born when I started in the mailroom, didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye as he handed me a cardboard box and a severance agreement that was essentially a slap in the face. He told me it was restructuring and optimizing human capital, but we both knew it was a calculated, cold-blooded move to save the company $4 million in retirement payouts. I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold numbness spreading from my chest to my fingertips, as the realization hit me that my entire future had just been liquidated to pad a quarterly earnings report. I've spent my life being the loyal company man, working 60-hour weeks, missing my kids' soccer games, and fixing every disaster that came across my desk, only to be treated like an expired piece of equipment. So, I have to ask you right now, would you have just walked away quietly and accepted your fate? Or would you have used the one piece of leverage you spent 3 decades building to burn it all down? Tell me if you think I was wrong for what I did next, because I'm about to tell you how one single phone call turned their optimization into the most expensive mistake in the history of the corporation. To understand the weight of what happened, you have to go back to 1996, the year I started at what was then a small, family-owned shipping firm. I was 24 years old, eager to prove myself, and the founder, Mr. Henderson, was a man of his word who believed that if you took care of the company would take care of you. I started at the bottom, CRATE secure in, and INDIVIDUORJLSN, do not I, za not ING, Rafian MANI, FESTA. They do not compete with the growth of others. Over the next nearly 3 decades, I climbed every rung of that ladder. I saw the company transition from paper ledgers to local servers, and finally to the cloud. I survived mergers, acquisitions, and economic recessions that saw half our staff laid off. But I always survived because I knew where the bodies were buried, not in a literal sense, but in a technical one. I was the architect of our proprietary routing system, a complex, sprawling beast of a software that managed every single ship, truck, and plane under our banner. It was built on layers of legacy code that only I truly understood. I was the guy everyone called at 3:00 a.m. when a container ship was stuck in a canal or a union strike threatened to shut down a West Coast port. My wife, Sarah, used to joke that GLS was my mistress because of how much time I spent devoted to its success. We had planned everything around my 30th anniversary. We had the cruise booked, the mortgage was almost paid off, and that pension was the final piece of the puzzle that would allow us to finally breathe and enjoy our golden years. But then Mr. Henderson retired, and the board brought in the efficiency experts. Kevin arrived 2 years ago with a mandate to cut costs at any cost. He looked at the veterans of the company not as assets, but as liabilities, expensive, aging liabilities with high salaries and looming pensions. I watched him systematically push out my friends, people I'd worked with for 20 years, replacing them with 20-somethings who were willing to work for half the pay and 0 benefits. I knew my turn was coming, but I thought, surely, they wouldn't be so cruel as to cut me off right at the finish line. I thought there was some shred of humanity left in the corporate world, I was wrong. The morning I was fired, the office felt eerie. There was no good morning from the receptionist, and Kevin's door was closed. When the HR director, a woman I'd had lunch with a dozen times, walked into my office with a security guard, I knew the floor was about to give way. The meeting took exactly 7 minutes. They offered me 3 months of salary if I signed a non-disparagement agreement and waived my right to sue for age discrimination. If I didn't sign, I got nothing. I looked at the calendar on the wall. The big red circle around my 30th anniversary was mocking me. It was only 3 days away. I asked Kevin, "You're doing this now, 72 hours before my vesting." He just adjusted his tie and said, "It's a business decision, Arthur. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally." They were stealing my life's work, my security, and my dignity, and they wanted me to treat it like a line item on a spreadsheet. As the security guard escorted me out past colleagues who looked away in shame, the shock began to turn into a white, hot, vibrating rage. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour, just staring at the building, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather groaned. I thought about the key man clause in our biggest contract, a contract I had negotiated personally 15 years ago with a man named Marcus Sterling. Marcus was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar manufacturing empire that accounted for nearly 40% of Gillette's annual revenue. He was old school, a man who valued relationships and loyalty above all else. When we signed that deal, Marcus insisted on a specific provision. The contract was contingent on the continuity of senior management he trusted. Specifically, it named me as the primary liaison. If I were to leave the company for any reason, Marcus had a 60-day window to terminate the entire agreement without penalty. Kevin, in his infinite arrogance and his rush to optimize, had clearly never actually read the fine print of the legacy contracts. He assumed the business belonged to the company, not the people. So that's the situation I was in, sitting in my car with my life in a cardboard box and a phone in my hand, knowing I had the power to vaporize nearly half of their business with one conversation. Before I tell you what I said and the absolute chaos that followed, I want you to pause right now and comment below. If you had the nuclear option to destroy the company that just cheated you out of your retirement, would you pull the trigger, or would you take the 3-month severance and try to move on? Let me know, because at that moment, I didn't feel like a loyal company man anymore. I felt like a man who had nothing left to lose. I dialed Marcus Sterling's private cell phone number, a number I'd only used a handful of times in 15 years. He picked up on the second ring. "Arthur, I was just thinking about you. Are we still on for that golf game next month to celebrate your retirement?" My voice was steady, but cold. "Actually, Marcus, there's been a change of plans. I've been terminated, effective immediately. Restructuring, they called it." The silence on the other end was deafening. Marcus wasn't just a client. He was a man who hated bullies and despised corporate snakes. "Terminated, 3 days before your 30th. Are they insane?" he asked. I explained the situation, the lack of cause, the 3-day gap, and the smug look on Kevin's face. Marcus let out a long, slow breath. "Arthur, you and I both know what's in paragraph 12 of our service agreement. I haven't been happy with the service since that new kid took over anyway. Mistakes are being made. Delays are happening. You were the only reason I stayed." I told him I wasn't calling to ask for a job or for him to do anything illegal. I was just calling as a friend to fulfill my professional obligation to inform him that I was no longer the liaison. Marcus chuckled, a dry, dangerous sound. "Oh, I know exactly what my obligations are, Arthur. You just sit tight. Go home to Sarah. Pour yourself a very expensive scotch. I'll handle the restructuring on my end." I went home, told Sarah everything, and we spent the next 48 hours in a state of surreal calm. I didn't sign the severance. I didn't answer my phone when HR called to follow up. Then, on the morning that would have been my 30th anniversary, the storm hit. At 9:00 a.m., Marcus Sterling's legal team delivered a notice to GLS headquarters. They were exercising the key man clause and terminating their contract effective immediately due to a breach of trust and loss of confidence in management. By 10:00 a.m., GLS stock price began a vertical dive. By noon, the board of directors had called an emergency meeting. They realized that by trying to save $4 million on my pension, they had just lost a contract worth nearly $200 million a year. My phone started blowing up. First it was Kevin, sounding panicked, leaving a voicemail saying there had been a misunderstanding and that we needed to talk about a consulting role. Then it was the HR director, sounding like she'd been crying, begging me to come in for a meeting with the board. I ignored them all. I waited until the following morning to walk back into that building, not as an employee, but as a man who held all the cards. I wasn't escorted by security this time. I was met at the door by the chairman of the board. Kevin was nowhere to be seen. I later found out he had been fired at 8:00 p.m. the night before, escorted out by the same guard who had walked me out. The board was desperate. They offered me my full pension, a massive lump, some bonus, and my old job back with a huge raise. I looked at the chairman and said, "I don't want my job back. I don't want to work for people who think loyalty has an expiration date. Here is my counter offer." I demanded my full vested pension as if I had reached 30 years, a 5-year salary settlement for the emotional distress and the attempt to defraud me of my benefits, and a formal, public apology. I also told them that Marcus Sterling wouldn't even consider coming back to the table unless I was the one who negotiated the new contract as an independent consultant with a massive retainer. They didn't even haggle. They signed everything within 2 hours. The aftermath was a total purge of the efficiency experts. The company had to learn a very expensive lesson about the value of the people who actually keep the lights on. I got my retirement and then some. Sarah and I are currently on that cruise, and every morning I wake up and look at the ocean. I think about that one phone call. I learned that being a loyal company man is a trap, but being an indispensable one is a superpower. Corporate culture will try to tell you that you are replaceable, that you are just a number, but they forget that some numbers are the foundation the whole building stands on. If you ever find yourself in a position where you're being pushed out, don't just look at what you're losing. Look at what you know that they don't. Use your history, use your relationships, and never, ever let them think they can walk over you without a cost. My story is a reminder that sometimes the burden the company wants to shed is actually the only thing keeping them afloat. If you think I did the right thing by taking down the company to save my future, hit that like button right now. It's important to stand up for ourselves in a world that sees us as disposable. Subscribe for more stories about people who finally had enough and fought back against the system, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Have you ever been pushed out of a job right before a big milestone? How did you handle it? I'll be in the comments reading your stories. I'll see you all in the next story.